I want you to stop whatever you're doing for just a second. I mean it. Just look around you. Look at the room you're in right now.
Yeah, look at the walls, the furniture. Look out the window if you can.
Exactly. Look at the street, the buildings. Think about the borders of your city or your country. Because usually, when we talk about human civilization, we talk about power.
Right. We talk about how empires rise, how governments keep control.
Yeah, and we tend to think of power in terms of these grand, abstract pillars. We think, oh, it's wealth, or it's justice, or some really compelling political ideology.
Or the social contract, right? We're all taught that in civics class.
Exactly. You probably believe deep down that human power is built on those things. But today, we are going to explore a completely different, totally terrifying premise.
And it's a massive slap in the face to everything we normally assume.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because the ultimate currency of human civilization, the hidden pillar holding up the entire illusion of political power, isn't money. It isn't the law. It is the physical destruction of the human body.
It's a totally radical proposition. It goes against literally everything we're taught.
Right.
But when you start to peel back the layers of how humans actually interact with authority, the reality is just stark. We're looking at the dark, silent mechanics of how our world is built and how it gets torn apart.
So our roadmap for this deep dive today is this monumental, paradigm-shifting book by a Harvard scholar named Elaine Scarry. It's called The Body in Pain.
Written back in 1985, but honestly, it feels like it explains the geopolitical headlines you read this morning.
Totally. And what we're going to do is take her historical records, her frameworks, and look at this terrifyingly simple idea. The making and unmaking of our entire reality depends completely on how we express or how we weaponize physical pain.
And we are keeping this grounded. We aren't just, sitting around philosophizing. We're going to look at the exact blueprints of how regimes operate.
It's actual mechanics.
Yeah. Like, we'll look at how torture works. And spoiler alert, everything Hollywood taught you about interrogations is a complete lie. It is almost never about getting secrets.
Which is just crazy to think about.
Right. We're also going to look at how wars use the shredded bodies of 19-year-old kids to make fragile political ideas feel real. And ultimately, we're going to look at the fundamental architecture of human suffering.
So to understand why physical pain is the ultimate weapon, we have to start at the ground level. We have to look at the one thing that pain destroys before it destroys anything else.
And that is our words, our language.
Right. Think about a headache. If you're listening right now, imagine the absolute worst migraine you've ever had.
Oh, man, the kind that makes you dizzy.
Yeah, that kind. For you, the person suffering, that pain is a state of 100% absolute certainty. It is the most real thing in the universe.
But for the person standing right next to you, just watching you wince, that same pain is a state of 0% certainty.
Right. To them, it's absolute doubt. It creates this massive, unbridgeable gap between two people. To have pain is to have certainty.
Right.
To hear about pain is to have doubt.
And the isolation of physical pain goes so much deeper than just not sharing an experience. If you look at human consciousness, our interior states almost always have an object.
What do you mean by an object?
Like, you feel love for someone, you feel hunger for food, fear of the dark. There's a referential target that connects your feeling to the outside world.
Ah, okay. The emotion is like a bridge. If I'm terrified, I'm pointing at a bear. The bear is the object.
Exactly. But physical pain is the only state of human consciousness that has no external object. It's not of or for anything. It's just pain.
It's a black hole.
A total sensory black hole. It collapses your entire universe down to the physical boundaries of your own body. And because it has no object, it actively resists language.
Because language is totally built on shared references.
Right.
Like if I say chair, we both instantly picture a chair.
Right, but pain destroys that shared reference entirely, which explains the sheer frustration of sitting in a doctor's office.
Oh, it's the worst. I mean, the English language has this almost infinite capacity to express complex, abstract ideas. You can read Shakespeare and see the tragedy of King Lear perfectly articulated.
Or read a poem about the exact agonizing nuance of unrequited love.
Yeah. But the second you try to explain a migraine to a doctor, you sound like a toddler. You say, it's throbbing, or it burns. Language just runs completely dry.
Virginia Woolf actually wrote a brilliant essay about this called On Being Ill. She points out how strange it is that literature cares so much about the mind, but almost entirely ignores the body.
Really? What did she say?
She wrote that English can express the thoughts of Hamlet, but it has no words for the shiver or the headache. And it's not just an English problem. This is a universal human deficit.
Pain actively destroys language.
Yes. As it intensifies, it reduces a highly articulate human being to a pre-language state. It sends us backward, back to the animalistic cries and groans we made before we ever learned to speak. The pain literally shatters the voice.
And the political danger of this is terrifying. If pain is invisible to the bystander, and if it completely destroys the sufferer's ability to even speak about it, it becomes insanely easy for a bystander to just ignore it.
Or to doubt it completely, or, in the darkest scenarios, to inflict it.
Because the torturer doesn't feel it, right?
Exactly. The inflictor feels nothing, and the victim is stripped of the language to communicate the horror. So the torturer is completely insulated from the reality of the agony they're causing.
Think about organizations like Amnesty International. This is the central, agonizing challenge they face every single day.
Right. How do you use language in a mailed newsletter to convey the absolute world-destroying reality of torture happening thousands of miles away?
They're trying to reach a reader who is, sitting comfortably in their suburban living room drinking a latte.
And they have to somehow coax that invisible, silent pain into visibility using words which we just established are fundamentally inadequate. They have to overcome that unbridgeable gap of doubt.
So they use biographical details, photographs, stories about the victim's family. They try to build a bridge of empathy before the reader just throws a letter in the recycling bin.
It is a daily war against the invisibility of suffering.
Okay, so if pain inherently destroys a person's voice, what happens when a regime decides to use that exact mechanism on purpose? I want to step into the interrogation room now.
Let's do it.
Because everything we are culturally conditioned to believe about torture is a complete fiction.
It truly is. And it's largely perpetuated by popular culture, movies, TV shows. We're taught that interrogations are all about extracting critical information.
The classic ticking time bomb scenario.
Yeah.
You have the rogue agent who is pushed to the edge because they need to know where the bomb is hidden, or they need the names of the rebel leaders right now.
Right. But when you look at the actual historical records, testimonies from political prisoners from the Greek junta in the late 60s, from Pinochet's Chile, from the Philippines, a much darker picture emerges.
The need for intelligence is just a lie.
A carefully crafted motive fiction. The questions asked by torturers are very often complete gibberish. They ask for information the regime already has. They ask for the names of dead people.
Wait, I have to stop you there. Why ask the questions at all then? If the torturer is screaming, give me the names, but they don't actually care about the names, what is the point?
Because it's not a data-gathering exercise. It is a theater of world destruction. The actual purpose of the interrogation is to visually and audibly deconstruct the prisoner's voice.
So the question is just an excuse.
It's the excuse that justifies the cruelty. It's a structural mechanism to translate pain into power. Think of the grotesque math happening in that room.
Okay, lay out the math for me.
The torturer inflicts massive physical pain. That pain causes the prisoner's world to shrink. Their family, their politics, their hopes, all of it vanishes into the black hole of their agonizing body.
Because pain has no object. It contracts everything inward.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the torturer stands right next to them, feeling zero pain. So to the torturer, their own world feels massive, expansive, and dominant.
Wow. So the larger the prisoner's pain, the smaller the prisoner's world becomes.
And the torturer uses this shrinking world to artificially inflate their own sense of dominance. They force the prisoner to betray themselves. By forcing them to speak the regime's words, to confess, to echo the interrogator, the torturer converts the prisoner's sheer physical agony into a hallucination of the regime's absolute power.
It's this dark alchemy. The physical pain is incontestably real to the victim. It's the most real thing they are experiencing. And the regime hijacks that feeling of absolute reality and staples it to themselves.
Right. Because outside that room, the regime's power might actually be incredibly fragile or deeply unpopular, but inside the room, it suddenly feels as incontestably real as the pain itself.
They steal the attributes of pain, its certainty, its totality, and attach those to the insignia of the state.
The state becomes all voice and power. The prisoner becomes all body and vulnerability.
That totally reframes how we should view a forced confession. We normally think of confession as a moral failing, right? Like a betrayal of your friends or your ideals under pressure.
But the real betrayal in that room isn't what the prisoner says. You cannot betray a world that has ceased to exist for you.
Because the pain has already destroyed their connection to the outside world.
Exactly. When pain is severe enough, it obliterates the contents of consciousness. The name of your child, your political ideology, none of it survives the black hole of agony.
So the confession just makes that internal destruction visible to the torturer.
Yes. It isn't a moral failing. It's simply the audible, recorded proof that a human being's world has been unmade.
This brings up something else that's super counterintuitive. To unmake a person's world, the torturer doesn't just attack their body with specialized tools. They attack the very concept of safety.
This is one of the most chilling parts.
Because when I picture a torture chamber, I think of medieval racks, iron maidens, devices designed solely for pain. But the historical reality is way more mundane and somehow way more terrifying.
Right. While specialized devices do exist, what's far more common is the weaponization of everyday domestic objects. A refrigerator, a bathtub, a chair, a bed.
It's like a horrific magic trick. You take the things invented to shelter us, and you invert their polarities so they destroy us. It's the ultimate perversion of home.
To understand how devastating this is, we have to define what civilization actually is. Civilization is a massive, externalized system of objects designed to project human comfort outward.
Okay, give me an example of that.
A chair is a materialized piece of empathy. It exists to relieve the human spine of the burden of standing. A wall exists to protect your body from the freezing wind. A bed allows you to rest safely.
So civilization is essentially just a massive system of pain relief.
Yes, and torture deliberately unmakes civilization by turning those exact symbols of shelter into agents of agony. The historical sources are full of this. Prisoners beaten with family-sized soft drink bottles.
Oh, God.
Heads slammed into refrigerator doors, drowned in bathtubs, handcuffed to filing cabinets for months. The psychological message is absolute. There is no safe space. Everything built to protect you will now break you.
It strips away any psychological refuge. You can't even look at a chair and think of rest because that's what they use to crush your hand. The unmaking of the room is the external mirror of what the pain is doing to your mind.
And it isn't just the furniture. The medical and legal professions are subverted too.
Right, because doctors are often there, aren't they?
The physician, whose role is to heal, is often in the room just to monitor vitals, to ensure the prisoner doesn't die before the interrogation is finished. The legal system is used to rubber stamp the detention. Every institution of care is inverted.
But the most sinister inversion is how the torturer turns the prisoner's own body into a weapon against itself. How does that work mechanically?
Through forced postures. A common method is forcing a prisoner to stand perfectly still for hours or even days, or forcing them to hold a heavy object in an unnatural position.
So the torturer isn't even touching them.
Exactly. The forced posture makes the prisoner's own muscles, their own bones, the agents of their torture. They experience the horrifying sensation of their own body tearing itself apart.
It's a forced self-betrayal on a cellular level. Your own weight is inflicting the agony. The torturer just sets the rules, sits back, and watches you destroy yourself.
It mimics a severe illness where your body turns against you, but here it's orchestrated by another person. The room is made hostile. The body is made hostile. Everything contracts into a singularity of pain.
Okay, so we've been looking at this on a micro scale. One tiny room, one isolated prisoner. But this exact same perversion of reality doesn't stay confined to a basement. It happens on a massive global scale.
Which brings us to the most catastrophic human activity of all war.
And it forces us to ask a question so simple it sounds naive. Why can't border disputes be settled by a chess match or a coin flip? Why must a geopolitical disagreement involve ripping apart human flesh?
If you look at it from the outside, it is completely absurd. Two countries disagree about an imaginary line on a map, or an abstract economic theory like capitalism versus communism.
Right, they disagree over invisible ideas. And to solve it, they send hundreds of thousands of young men into a muddy field to shred each other's bodies with hot metal.
If you strip away the romantic history books, war is literally just taking abstract concepts and trying to glue them to physical wounds.
The absurdity is the point, though, right? Why doesn't a chess match work?
Because the outcome of a chess match evaporates the moment the game ends. It has no physical weight. It's based on temporary rules. The moment you walk away, the reality of the win vanishes.
It doesn't stick to the world.
Exactly. But war's primary function is to juxtapose the most indisputably real thing on Earth, a bleeding human body, with the most abstract, ghostly things on Earth. Ideologies, borders, authority.
Ghostly things. That is the perfect way to phrase it. Because an ideology is a ghost. You can't touch democracy. You can't put sovereignty in a wheelbarrow. They only exist in our collective imagination.
And when an ideology loses its power to persuade people naturally, it acts like a starving vampire. It is desperate for substance. It needs blood to feel real.
So it borrows the incontestable reality of torn human tissue to give itself the illusion of physical substance.
Yes. Scarry calls this mechanism analogical verification.
Okay, I want to make sure we fully grasp analogical verification. That feels like the Rosetta Stone for understanding conflict. Let's invent a hypothetical. Nation A and Nation B are fighting over a strip of land. Let's call it the Oakhaven Valley.
Okay, both claim it based on history, but words fail, so they go to war.
Right. How does analogical verification actually play out there?
It plays out through the sheer accumulation of physical damage. They fight for months. Thousands are killed. Tens of thousands mutilated. Finally, Nation A overpowers Nation B.
Nation B retreats. Nation A stands in the valley and says, "This is ours." But how do they prove it?
They point to the mountain of corpses. They use the material weight of the dead and injured to say, look at the physical cost. Look how real our claim to this valley is. It must be true because this blood is real.
Wow. The dead bodies become the heavy physical anchors for the floating political idea of ownership. The sheer scale of the slaughter freezes the outcome in place.
It makes it feel like a hard, undeniable fact of nature. The physical injury verifies the political claim. Human bodies are just raw material used to build a foundation for an idea that can't stand on its own.
But if the central, undeniable act of war is injuring, if that is the core mechanic, why do we almost never hear it described that way?
That's the magic trick of military jargon.
Right. If you listen to generals or politicians, the reality of human flesh being torn apart is systematically erased from the vocabulary.
The strategic manipulation of language is essential to keep the war going. The core activity is injuring, yet the word injury completely disappears from strategic discourse.
We use what Scarry calls paths of linguistic disappearance. We hide the bleeding bodies from our own minds.
It's total misdirection. The magician waves a flashy cloth in your left hand so you don't see what the right hand is doing. The military uses words like surgical strike or neutralizing a target.
Or softening the defenses, so we don't have to visualize the volume of human tissue being blown apart.
Exactly. One common path is the road metaphor. Civilian deaths are bumps on the road to freedom. This makes the injury seem like an accidental consequence of traveling toward a noble goal.
Even though the injured bodies aren't just on the road, they are the road. The road is paved with them.
Another one is the production metaphor. Dead soldiers are the cost of liberty. We fold human lives into an accounting ledger. We say, the cost was high, but we purchased freedom.
It turns a bleeding human being into a currency exchange. It strips them of their humanity completely. And it gets even more surreal when strategists talk about the units themselves, like a division.
This is one of the most effective tricks. We project the idea of the human body onto the military machine itself. We talk about an army as a giant colossus.
Right. A general will say the left flank of the division was wounded, or the armored column was crippled.
We lend the language of human suffering to metal tanks and abstract troop formations. And by doing that, we hide the thousands of real 19-year-olds who are bleeding to death inside that giant.
We mourn the wounded flank of the army, which is just an idea on a map, instead of visualizing the severed arteries of the kids on the ground.
The giant mask of the division hides the individual faces of the dead.
You know, I used to think this kind of jargon was just a malicious conspiracy, like evil generals in a smoky room trying to fool the public.
But it's actually a deep psychological necessity.
Right. If populations truly visualized the obsessive act of reciprocal injuring, if we watched visceral footage of every bullet hitting flesh face, society would collapse under the grief. The jargon is a shock absorber.
It allows the cycle of massive violence to continue without paralyzing scrutiny. By abstracting it, we make it possible to fund it and accept it. But here's the strange truth about those injuries. They don't actually care who wins.
Wait, what does that mean? How does a wound not care who wins?
It means a severed artery doesn't bleed in the shape of an American flag, or a Soviet hammer and sickle. A wound has no nationality.
Inside the torn tissue, there's no ideology. It's just broken flesh.
Exactly. So the bodies themselves aren't inherently proving that democracy is better than fascism, or vice versa.
And this challenges a huge foundational text of military strategy, right? Karl von Clausewitz.
Yeah, the famous Prussian theorist. He believed war had a self-executing power. He thought you inflict so much damage that you physically disarm the enemy, forcing them to stop.
But history shows that's almost never true. Defeated nations are rarely completely disarmed. They bounce back so fast. Look at post-World War II Germany.
the country was flattened, but within decades it had immense industrial power again. The life force of a population is rarely eradicated completely.
So if they aren't physically incapacitated, why do they surrender?
Because of the sheer psychological and material weight of the bodies. The toll becomes too great. But because the wounds are referentially unstable, meaning the torn tissue is blank, the winner can easily swoop in and attach their own ideology to the loser's wounds.
This math is terrifying. The physical injury doesn't prove who is right. It just proves a massive, undeniably real contest occurred.
Yes. We fought, we bled, an outcome was decided. And the winner gets to take the sheer realness of that contest and staple it to their political platform. The winner's flag is painted on the blank canvas of the wound.
Okay, that brings us to a really uncomfortable moral distinction. If war and torture both use human bodies to validate power, what makes conventional war different from a torture chamber? Is there any moral difference at all?
There is a difference, and it's crucial. There is a tragic, shining thread of morality in conventional war that separates it from a mugging or a torture room. And that thread is consent.
Consent. It feels so weird to use that word when talking about getting blown up by artillery.
It is weird, but it's what separates war from pure murder. In a traditional war, soldiers make an extraordinary agreement. By putting on the uniform, taking the oath, taking up arms, they actively consent to risk having their bodies radically altered.
They volunteer their own flesh as collateral for their country's ideology. They're saying, I believe in this invisible idea so much, I will put my body on the line to make it real.
And they engage in a reciprocal contest. Both sides have weapons. There is mutual agreement to enter this arena. This gives traditional war a tragic moral dignity. The body is offered up.
Whereas in torture, consent is absolute zero.
The victim is completely non-consenting. Stripped of weapons, their body altered against their will to substantiate a regime they probably despise.
It's the difference between a tragic duel where both parties agree to the risk and a hostage situation. But wait, what about modern warfare? What about pushing a button and wiping out a city with a nuclear missile?
This is where the ethics completely break down. According to this framework, nuclear war is not war. It is globalized torture.
A nuclear bomb isn't a weapon of war. It is a planetary torture device. That is chilling.
Think about the mechanics of consent and reciprocity. A nuclear strike abandons both. Millions of people, civilians, kids, the elderly, are unilaterally erased in an instant.
They have no chance to surrender, no chance to put on a uniform.
No chance to say, I consent to this contest. The reciprocity completely vanishes. It leaves only the pure, one-sided sadism of torture.
The populations are just used as a blank, unconsenting canvas for someone else's power. It operates on the exact same blueprint as the interrogator in the basement.
Exactly the same.
Okay, we have spent a lot of time in the dark on this deep dive. We've looked at how torture unmakes the world, how war unmakes the body. It's a massive amount of destruction. But human history isn't just pain, right?
No, there is an exact, mirror opposite process. If pain unmakes the world, we have to look at how we make the world.
How do we build it instead of tearing it down?
We look at the antidote. If pain is the ultimate force of unmaking, imagination is the ultimate force of making. They are the two extreme poles of human experience.
How are they exact opposites?
Think about the spatial experience. When you're in agonizing pain, the outside world stops existing. Your universe shrinks down to the exact size of your own body. You don't care about politics or art.
You only care about the throbbing in your head. You contract. You are entirely body and no world.
Now think about when you are fiercely imagining something. Daydreaming, writing a story, designing a building. What happens to your physical body?
It kind of disappears. You forget you're sitting in a chair. You forget you're hungry. You are projected outward into the thing you're creating. You become a disembodied mind.
Imagination expands your body to the size of the universe. In imagination, you are entirely world and no body.
That is a beautiful symmetry. Pain is all body, no world. Imagination is all world, no body. But imagination is just in my head. I can imagine a bridge, but it doesn't help anyone cross a river.
Right. So how do we get to civilization? Through work. Work, or the making of artifacts, is the magical bridge between the two poles.
Use physical labor to solidify the imagination. Let's look at a concrete example. What's the difference between a weapon and a tool? Physically, they can be the exact same object, a sharp steel blade on a wooden handle.
Yes, a knife is a knife. But the intent changes its entire existential meaning. A weapon hits sentient human flesh and causes pain. It forces the victim back into the black hole of their body.
But a tool hits non-sentient wood or stone.
Exactly. You use the blade to carve a bowl or cut stones for a wall. The tool is used to relieve human pain. It builds a shelter so you aren't cold.
This completely reframes how I look at mundane objects. A chair isn't just furniture. It is the physical manifestation of someone saying, "I wish my spine didn't hurt."
A coat is the materialized thought, "I wish I wasn't freezing."
A light bulb is, "I wish I wasn't in the dark." Civilization is just a massive materialized system of pain relief.
Making an artifact is the ultimate heroic act of humanity. We take our internal vulnerability and project it safely into the external world. We build a world that cares for us.
The artifact takes over the burden of sentience. The chair literally suffers gravity so your back doesn't have to. The coat suffers the freezing wind so your skin doesn't have to.
But here's where it gets really deep. What happens when this drive to project ourselves outward intersects with our oldest theologies and economic systems? Because we don't just build chairs, we build conceptual frameworks.
Scarry takes this structural lens, pain making things real, artifacts projecting sentience, and applies it to foundational texts. Let's look at the Old Testament purely as an ancient structural blueprint for authority.
The ancient Hebrews had a massive philosophical problem. How do you prove that an invisible, disembodied God is real? He has no physical form. He is pure, invisible voice.
It's the exact same problem as the ghostly ideology in war. How do you anchor an invisible concept?
And the structural solution in the Old Testament is that God's power is verified by leaving physical marks on mortals. Because God lacks a physical body, his reality is substantiated by injuring human bodies.
Wounds, plagues, famines. The human body acts as a canvas to prove the invisible God exists.
The pain of the mortal verifies the reality of the divine. The human body is altered to say the invisible voice is real.
But then Christianity comes along and flips that entire script upside down, structurally speaking.
A radical 180-degree flip. In the New Testament, God takes on a human body. The invisible voice becomes incarnate. And crucially, he takes the wound.
The crucifixion is the narrative of God putting himself on the receiving end of the weapon.
Structurally, by taking the pain upon himself, humanity is freed from having to use their own bodies to prove God's power. God uses his own body to substantiate his reality.
The artifact, the human body of Christ, completes the verification cycle itself, relieving humanity of that burden. It's a shift from weapon to tool. That is staggering.
And she doesn't stop at religion. She applies this exact dynamic to economics, specifically capitalism and Karl Marx.
Marx focuses on the creation of objects, right? Tools, factories. We create these as extensions of our bodies to relieve our pain. A loom extends the weaving hand.
They are supposed to be artifacts of care. But under what Marx calls alienated labor, something goes horribly wrong. Those very objects are severed from us.
The worker no longer owns the tool. The creation is disconnected from the creator.
And when that happens, the polarity reverses. Capital becomes a giant, lifeless monster. It turns around and feeds on the bleeding bodies of the workers who made it.
The tool becomes a weapon again. It's like the torture room where the safe domestic object is inverted.
Instead of the factory relieving the worker's burden, it dictates the pace of their exhaustion. It destroys the worker's body to generate wealth for an abstract entity. The artifact is captured and used to inflict pain inward.
So whether it's theology or economics, the pattern holds. When our creations are connected to us, driven by empathy, they relieve our pain. But when they're severed from us, they become weapons that unmake us.
It is the eternal seesaw of human existence, the balance between making and unmaking.
Let's take a breath and recap this immense journey. We started in the dark. We saw how physical pain is a black hole that destroys language. We saw how the interrogation room is a theatrical lie, stealing a voice to inflate fragile power.
We saw how wars are absurd duels, using bleeding bodies to anchor ghostly ideologies, and how we hide that reality behind military jargon.
We look at the dignity of consent in conventional war, and how nuclear weapons turn war into globalized, non-consenting torture. But then we look at the light, how imagination and work push pain out of our bodies.
We build chairs and coats to relieve the burden of sentience. And we saw how dangerous it is when our creations are severed from us and turned back into monsters.
If there's one final lingering thought I want to leave you with, it's this. If you are sitting down right now, look at the chair you're sitting on. Look at the window, letting in the light, the walls keeping out the wind.
Every single one of those mundane objects is an act of profound historical empathy. They are materialized love, designed over millennia to protect you from the pain of the world.
They are our artifacts of care. They are the opposite of pain.
But remember how incredibly fragile this civilization is. With just a slight shift in human intention, a slight turn toward cruelty, every single one of those objects can be turned back into a weapon.
The line between making the world and unmaking it isn't some massive, impenetrable wall. It's just a choice. Normally with a medical diagnosis, there's precision. You break your arm, the x-ray shows a line, the doctor says there it is.
It's visible and clean.
But when you step into the world of human pain, a migraine, a political prisoner, a soldier, that x-ray machine is broken. The most real thing in the world is completely invisible to everyone else. It is our fundamental human responsibility to build the tools to see it, to imagine it, and to refuse to let those tools be turned into weapons.